Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Candice. Today we are going to be talking about healthy boundaries as a Christian, forgiveness, and all of that sort of stuff. We're going to pray for this video, of course, and then we'll dive right in. God, thank you so much for showing us all of the facets of what love really is. Love that will correct us if we're wrong. Love that will bless us when we do well. Love that will ultimately punish us if we're doing things that need to be corrected. Love in all of its facets, in the way that you show it and how healthy it really is. I ask that you open the eyes, ears, and hearts of anybody listening to this video, and that you would take my words and have them be yours, Papa. I ask these things in Jesus Christ's name. Okay. So, I have encountered this multiple times with multiple people, where people believe, I don't know if these people are just new to the faith or have an interesting view of Christianity and, have not actually read the Bible for themselves or whatever the case may be. But I've encountered this multiple times where people believe that if you are a Christian, you must love everyone, which, yes, we're supposed to love everyone, but the definition that they have of love is love that's only sunshine and rainbows, right? Love that will put up with any behavior, love that will submit to anything, love that will not confront and tell someone when what they're doing is hurting them or that something is wrong. I think people have warped what they believe love to be, and so they somehow believe that, well, if you're not enabling my behavior, if you're not, just going along with what I have, if you're not loving me anyway, even though I'm sinning against you, that somehow you're not a good enough Christian. And this ultimately is false, okay? And so I'm here to explain that. We're going to talk about some Bible verses about that, healthy boundaries, what it looks like. Ultimately, in this world, there are going to be conflicts, right? We are going to have conflict with other people at some point in time. This may be friends, this may be family members, this may be random people on the street, right? This may be a parent, this may be a child, this may be a spouse, whatever the case may be. We are bound to have some sort of conflict with someone at some point, right? So in the Bible, God gives us examples of what to do in the cases of these conflicts, right? Throughout the New Testament, there's multiple scriptures scattered here and there. We're going to go to Luke first, because we're going to talk about forgiveness first. Because usually, most conflicts, both parties are not necessarily intending evil, right? So in most conflicts, usually one person is ignorant of what they are doing or how whatever behavior it is that they're exhibiting is affecting other people. And when the other party then tells them about it, usually that person will then repent, right? And be like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that saying that or doing that was affecting you in such a way, right? In those cases, Jesus says, Luke chapter 17, verses 3 and 4. He says, take heed to yourselves. If thy brother trespass against thee, so if someone sins against you, right, rebuke him. So confront him about it. Tell them how that makes you feel. Tell them what it is that they're doing that's wrong, that's hurting you in some way, right? And it says, and if he repent, so if he asks for forgiveness, if he says, I'm sorry, if he apologizes, forgive him. And if he trespass against thee 7 times in a day, and 7 times in a day turn again to thee, saying, I repent, thou shalt forgive him, right? So if you're having a relationship with someone, whatever kind of relationship that may be, and they're doing things that are wrong, right? It's your job as a Christian to lovingly confront them on these things and be like, hey, when you lie to me, it does this and that, makes me feel this way, it makes it hard to trust you. When you say these things to me, it fill in the blank. When you do this behavior, it fill in the blank, right? It's our job to talk about it, right? Not to ignore it, not to sweep it under the rug, not to just continue on with our day and just let it build up inside until it's some giant ball of bitterness. No, it's our job to tell the person that, hey, what you're doing hurts me, okay? And a lot of people get hung up on this part of the equation. They don't like confrontation or don't see it as something that can be positive because they've had a lot of negative confrontations. But this is the beginning of communication, because ultimately the other person could be just ignorant of how their actions are affecting you. It could be just a misunderstanding. It could be that they just don't realize that the way they said that thing hurt you, or the way that they did that was something that you didn't like. You know, they don't know unless you actually tell them, right? So that's what he says. He says you need to tell them first off, and then if they turn around and say, I'm sorry, then you forgive them, right? Doesn't matter if they do something 7 times in a day and they turn around, as long as they're turning around and apologizing for it and trying to mend the relationship, you're supposed to forgive them and then move on, right? That's what he says about forgiveness. Now, the problem is when both parties, when you have one party that is being confronted, right, and then refuses to change, refuses to care, refuses to see that what they're doing is hurting you, or refuses to change the behavior, somehow turns it around and tries to make it your fault that they're behaving the way that they're behaved, unhealthy sort of things. And when things get to the point where they are unhealthy, right, when it's one person is continuously getting hurt and the other person doesn't care or doesn't seem to want to change, that's when healthy boundaries need to be set, right? Now, Jesus himself talks a bit about this in Matthew. He says this in Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 through 17, okay? Jesus says, moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, so if anyone is sinning against you, whether that be lying, manipulating, abusing, etc., 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 go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. So you go and you confront them alone about it, right? If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. So if the person will hear you and understand you and be like, oh, okay, I get where you're coming from, then you've gained that relationship back, right? But if he will not hear thee, then take with thee 1 or 2 more, that in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. So if this person is not willing to hear what you're saying, right, then you take a couple more people, another person or 2, not like 10, but another person or 2 who know these behaviors, who've seen these behaviors exhibited, who themselves have been the recipients of bad behaviors or bad language or whatever the case may be, or abuse, if that's the case, right? And it says then, if he shall neglect to hear them, so if this person again is still unwilling to listen, unwilling to change, unwilling to understand that what they're doing is harmful, right? And then it says, tell it unto the church. Now this, of course, works if the person actually is a Christian, right? If the person is a Christian and then you go to your congregation, your church, whatever, and try and have it solved this way, it could be helpful. There are relationships, of course, that we have, whether it be family or friends, who maybe they are not Christians. And in that case, it'd be a little bit different. But if they are a Christian, right, it says, tell it to the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as a heathen man and a publican. Basically stating, okay, if this person will not hear you alone, then bring 1 or 2 other people. If this person will still not hear you and not acknowledge that they're hurting you or change their behavior in any way, then if they're a Christian, take it to the church, right? If they still won't hear it, and if they still think they're doing nothing wrong, right, and they want to continue whatever behavior this is, then you're supposed to basically shun them, right? And not have anything to do with them. And this may sound harsh, right? A lot of people think this does sound harsh. A lot of people think, well, cutting someone off is not loving. But if you think about it, sometimes it is the most loving thing you can do. Because there are some people, and I've experienced this in my own life, right? There are some people who will not fully grasp the consequences of their actions, will not fully grasp how that they are hurting someone else, and they won't care, for that matter, that they are hurting someone else, especially if they're not a Christian. They won't care, they won't want to fix things or want to change until healthy boundaries are set. Because then healthy boundaries provide the consequence for their actions, right? If somebody is constantly lying to you, right? If you have a friend who they say they're going to do something, they don't do it. They do it again. They say they're going to do something, or they say that they're going to whatever, and they don't. Or they tell you this story and it's not true. And you finally go to them and you're like, hey, this is not behavior that's okay. Like, I am not okay with you lying to me. I do not deserve to be lied to, and you explain it in a loving way, of course. And if they refuse to change, refuse to repent, and they just continue lying to you, the ball is then in your court. Are you going to let the behavior continue and continue reaping the very negative rewards, shall we say, of that behavior, of then deteriorating trust between you and the person and not being able to have a good relationship with them because you can't trust them anymore, and getting to the point where you end up being very bitter, right? Or do you say, I'm sorry, but if you're going to continue to lie to me, I cannot hang out with you anymore. I can't be friends with you because I do not deserve to be lied to, and this is not doing anything good for me at all. I have to establish this boundary. Sometimes you have to establish the boundary and cut the person out of your life for maybe a little while until they realize what they're doing is wrong and they repent and you try it again. Or sometimes it could be for an extended period of time if this is the kind of person who simply does not wish to change. Okay, it's unfortunate when these things happen, of course. Nobody wants to be the kind of person who has to cut someone out of their life. But sometimes when the relationship is that toxic, when it's gotten to the point where you can no longer trust the person, okay? When it's gotten to the point where every interaction you have with this person is negative and makes you feel horrible when you leave, it's no longer serving you or them, obviously, right? If this is the kind of relationship where this person is being enabled by you, right? Let's face it, if you're letting the behavior continue, whatever it may be, if it's they are getting themselves drunk and then driving and you go bail them out of jail over and over and over again, right? You are enabling that behavior. This can apply to, again, multiple things. But if you are enabling their behavior, they are going to want that to continue, right? If you are enabling it, you are ultimately not really loving them because you're letting them keep doing this stuff that they're doing, right? God does not enable our bad behavior, right? If we do something wrong, if we sin against him, there are natural consequences that happen, right? For a lot of the people who decide that they're going to go and have sex with this person, that person, and the other, there are things like STDs that happen, unwanted pregnancies that happen, extra heartbreak when things end up not working out because then you've given yourself to that person, right? Like, there are natural consequences to our behaviors. In the same way that we set this up in society, right? If you steal, the consequences, you're probably going to go to jail, right? Or have to pay back and then some, whatever it is you've stolen. It's the way our entire world is set up because God is the one who set it up. He has healthy boundaries with us. And so for people to say that, if you're establishing a boundary or you're cutting somebody out of your life, that, you're not loving them, so you must not be a really good Christian. It's just not true. And they just don't fully understand whatever it is, the relationship it is that you've had to cut off. I had to cut off a relationship, a few, to be frank. And some of those relationships were cut off just for a little bit. Some were cut off for decades. When it becomes a negative, toxic, unhealthy relationship. It's not sustainable, and it's not loving to continue to be in it if the behaviors of both parties are not helping each other, right? So if you are staying in the relationship and your behavior, or you're just not confronting whatever this is that's going on, or not dealing with it, or not establishing a boundary, is ultimately leading the other person to continue the bad behavior, and then their bad behavior, of course, is negatively affecting you, then it's not healthy to be in that relationship. And that applies to no matter who the person is to you. Whether that person is a parent, whether that person is a child, whether that person is a cousin or a friend or a church member that you know, or whatever the case may be. If both parties, by behaviors or words or lack of words, are hurting each other or are negatively impacting each other in the long run, then the most loving thing you can do is to let that relationship go. Because that way, then you are not ingesting all of that negativity yourself, first off, right? Depending on what the person's doing. If it's physical abuse, you're not being hit or beat up or whatever the case is, which is a good first step for you to start to heal from that, right? If they are a compulsive liar, you separating yourself from those lies is going to have a better effect on your mood, on the way you trust people, just on your mental health in general, right? If this person is doing other sins against you, like if it's your spouse and they are committing adulteries, right? Separating yourself from that person for a length of time might be the most loving thing that you can do, because then they'll understand and they'll get their head on straight, hopefully, right? It's not always the case, but hopefully they'll get their head on straight and understand that, hey, no, this person, my spouse, is not going to put up with these behaviors. So now I have a consequence in front of me, and now I have to choose. Am I going to continue with this behavior and lose my family, lose my spouse, or am I going to repent, let it go, and try and rebuild what I have? Right? If you just let the behaviors continue, then the people don't have to make that choice. And that's where the issue comes in, right? Because if they don't have the if-then statements, like what God did in the Old Testament with Israel over and over and over again, right? He told them, if you continue doing what's right, if you continue with good behaviors, right, then I will be with you, I will bless you, you will eat from the land, blah, 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 right? He also said, if you don't do these things, if you choose to go after other gods, if you choose to commit fornications, if you choose to kill people and do all this other stuff, then this is what's going to happen. And he kept his word. This is why we see Israel over and over and over again going into captivity in the Old Testament. And then later on, they turn around, they repent, they say they're sorry, and then God brings them back. Right? This could be the case too if you cut this person off, right? Whoever they may be. If you have to get to that point, which some unhealthy relationships just do need to get to that point. Now, you're of course called to forgive this person. Whether they repent or not, it is our duty as a Christian to not hold that bitterness inside, to not let it fester, right, and become a problem for us, to forgive and let it go, right? Now, forgiving and let it go does not mean that that person has to be in your life. You can forgive somebody from a distance if you need to for healthy reasons, right? You can forgive somebody from a distance and yet still not have anything to do with them. When we forgive them, it releases us. It's not necessarily for the other person's benefit. I mean, yes, if they know that you've forgiven them, it can be beneficial to them, right? But ultimately, forgiveness is really letting go of it yourself and freeing yourself from reliving the trauma, from reliving all of those negative moments. It frees you from the bitterness, from the anxiety, from the depression, whatever it is that comes along with those behaviors, right? It frees you and has you let it go. So it's a good thing to forgive someone, right? That and healthy boundaries are not always the same thing, right? Sometimes you have to have the boundary. You can forgive them and still have a boundary of, well, I'm not going to have anything to do with you until you start treating me in a healthy way, right? Now, if they do eventually, say 6 months, a year from now, 10 years from now, half a lifetime from now, whenever it is, if they do finally turn around and acknowledge what they did to you, acknowledge the fact that, yes, their behaviors were toxic, acknowledge the fact that they were sinning, acknowledge the fact that they are actually sorry for what they did, and if they ask for your forgiveness, then that's the stepping stone that you could potentially start rebuilding a relationship from, right? It might take a while, but at least that's the first stepping stone that you could rebuild that relationship. But until they are willing to do that, until they are ready to acknowledge what they did, until they are ready to realize that what they were doing is hurting other people and by proxy then hurting themselves, like until they're ready to come to that realization on their own, sometimes it's better off to not have anything to do with them. And this is biblical, guys. Like, this is biblical. I can't even count the number of times I've had somebody tell me that, well, you're not a good enough Christian because you cut so-and-so off, or you're not a good enough Christian because if you were, you would love me even though I'm hurting you. You're not a good enough Christian because you should be enabling my bad behaviors. Now, when you do establish boundaries, okay, you need to be prepared that there is going to be pushback. There is going to be a confrontation. Guaranteed. Because when you no longer enabling somebody's behavior, they're going to be mad. They're not going to be happy that you have chosen not to bail them out of jail for the 15th time when they decide to get drunk. They're not going to be happy that you stop talking to them because they're lying to you all the time. They're not going to be happy that you decided to stop seeing them because they're being abusive, right? They're not going to be happy that you are going to set a boundary in that relationship. But it is the best thing you can do for them. Honestly, having healthy boundaries is not just good for yourself, it is good for that person. Because when they finally have a consequence to their actions, or to their words, or whatever it is, when they finally have to deal with a consequence, then they can finally have the opportunity to learn that what they're doing is not okay, to learn that, oh, you're actually hurting somebody else, right? To learn from their mistakes. It gives them the opportunity to do that. But if they never have a consequence for their behavior, they're never going to have that opportunity to learn. I mean, we do this with kids, right? If a kid smacks their parent in the face, the parent needs to establish a consequence. Like, oh, if you do that, you're going to be sitting here in timeout. Why? Because then the child can realize, oh, well, if I decide to do this, I'm going to have to do this. And if I decide to not do this, then everything's okay, right? And so then they can make that choice and learn from the behavior. Sometimes you have to do that with adults too. It is what it is. I hope that whatever conflict it is that you're going through, whatever relationship issues you may be having, right, that you will take them to God and ask Him if it is time for you to establish some healthy boundaries. And if it is, ask Him for strength, because He will give you the strength to do it. He'll give you the strength to follow through with whatever you say you're going to do in the if-then statements, right? It will ultimately be much better on the other side. It's not going to be pleasant in the beginning, right? Having to deal with boundaries, right? Having to teach a kid not to smack you, right? They're going to put up a fit the first however many times, but eventually they learn, right? It's the same thing with adults. Eventually we learn, but it may take a while. On the other end of it, though, you have peace, right? You have peace because you are not connected to those bad behaviors anymore. You have peace because you know that you tried your best in that relationship. You have peace because you know you confronted it in a loving way. You have peace because you know that ultimately letting them go is what's best for them. And that peace surpasses anything. That peace is what gets you through. And that peace, of course, comes mostly from God, right? Knowing that He will always be there for you, even when other people aren't. I pray this finds you in good spirits, and that this will help you in some way. If it does, or if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them down in the comments. I'd love to hear them. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.